Okay, today we're going to talk about global population. We have 7 billion, currently approximately 7 billion people that inhabit the Earth, and that's projected to grow. In 2050 it should be 9 billion people. So we have grown throughout history, and we're still growing. The fastest continent which is growing at the moment is Africa. They're growing very fast, but we have seen lots of growth over the past decades in China and India. In fact, China and India account for 40% of the Earth's population, 40%. And in the West, our population tends to be in decline, not growing, although we have good immigration numbers. Population is very important because it affects how the government must respond to the economy. It affects government spending, government taxation, etc. So it's a very important topic economically. We tend to think, there tends to be a myth that the more we are, the less we will have. But in fact, if we look at the historic data, we can see that the more populous we are, the more prosperous we become. We can see throughout history here, the prosperity has shot up with the population. As the population shot up, so did the prosperity. So it doesn't follow the same logic as other species. We see in other species, maybe if they become more populous, there's less food for everybody, for all the animals, and so this has a natural effect of stopping the population growth. In the human species, it seems that we can make dramatic advances with more populous human race, because there's more ideas and more to cooperate, more to collaborate, and with the ideas comes the productivity. We're able to produce more with more brains. That's what really makes the big increases in production in the human race, not the physical labour, not fighting for food, but actually putting our brains together and coming out with solutions. So we do find population growth doesn't actually threaten our prosperity, but in fact helps our prosperity if that population growth is developed, educated, competent to solve problems. Now, when we look at the population of a country in economic terms, we have to look first at the dependent population, those who don't work. We can think, students, old people, maybe people that are ill. These people are dependent, they're not producing anything, but they need obviously to live, to consume, to eat and live somewhere, etc. We do have a ratio of the dependent population. There's this ratio where you've got the dependent population divided by the working population. I've done it for South Africa, and we can see that the 32 million divided by the 17 million dependent population produces this number, 1,9, and that would mean that for every person working, they must support themselves, but also 1.9 people that are dependent on them. And that, yeah, this does have huge implications for tax, government spending, but also productivity. Obviously, if they've got to keep 1.9 people and themselves, they've got to be very productive. I've shown productivity as somebody being able to do a lot of things, and you know, things like computers, robots can increase our productivity, and so help us solve this big dependency. Dependent population has increased in many countries, in many developed countries. Here we've got an image in the 1990s in London. We've got 4 people supporting 2 old people. Then you've got just 2 people supporting 2 old people. And then in the future, you will have 1 person supporting 2 old people. So we can see very visually the effects of this. But we choose this. We choose to have a bigger dependent population, because we choose to have our young people in education much longer, until they're 25 sometimes, and also our pensioners not producing for decades, and for 30, 35 years maybe they're not producing anything. And this is part of our economic prosperity. We can't say that this is a burden, because this is what we choose for ourselves and also for others. So, we ourselves want to be able to retire at 65 or 67 now in Italy, and we're living longer, and also we want to be able to go to university, etc. So this is part of our prosperity, part of our lifestyle, this free time, not necessarily free time when you're studying, but when you're old, you have a lot of free time. And we want a prosperous old age too. So what is the optimum population? We think about the optimum population as being the correct amount of quantity of people for the natural resources of a country. So what I mean correct, but the quantity that will produce the most prosperity, economic prosperity. By resources we mean, the land, the soil, the minerals, the water, the animals. These are natural resources. Obviously, if there's too many people, and to use these natural resources, we can say it's overpopulated. Even that's a bit dangerous, really, because Japan has a lot of people for the natural resources. There's 200 million Japanese in a very small space, yet they do very well economically because they focus on productivity and technology, etc. So, it does depend on development, this, but we can say if there's too many people for the natural resources, it's overpopulated. And also you can say if there's for the natural resources not enough people to take advantage of those natural resources, to use those natural resources, we can say the country is underpopulated. The population needs to grow. Right. causes of population change. There can be three reasons for population change. A change in the number of babies being born, a change in the deaths of the population, the number of people dying, and a change in the number of net immigration. Net immigration. Okay, so when we talk about net immigration, we're talking about the immigrants minus the emigrants, those coming in minus those leaving. That will leave us a number of how much population has changed. If it's minus, here we've got a graph of population for Greece over time. And we can see here there's a net immigration in the plus area. So actually they had more immigrants than emigrants, people leaving. Otherwise it would be here. If there were more people leaving and less coming in, the net immigration would be here. So those three factors are what influences a country's growth. And reasons for differences in birth rate. So we're going to look at the reasons for differences in birth rate, death rate and immigration. There are lots of differences in birth rates. We tend to have the richer countries with smaller families and the poorer countries with larger families. Probably very much to do with lifestyle. If you, in a rich country, if you have children, those children will cost a lot of money with all the technologies, and they want to go to universities, and a phone, a car, etc. There will be a lot of resources. It's very expensive. Whereas in a poorer country, the children tend to go to work early and contribute to the family. So it does go on living standards. In poorer countries, they have bigger families, so those children can contribute. They're stronger. They feel, the family feels stronger. They don't get their security from the government. They get it from having a big family. Whereas in the more developed countries, they will have fewer babies because the babies become their responsibility more than a protection. So living standards has a very big influence. And then you have other factors like contraception. If availability of contraception will obviously change the birth rate. If there's not much family planning and knowledge, even knowledge about this, it will have an influence, a big influence. And customs and religions will have an influence. In Afghanistan, for example, many girls don't go to school and they don't work, and they're kind of hidden from society. And so these things will have an effect on the birth rate. Obviously, if they do have to go to work, etc., then they won't be able to have all the babies. In fact, the next point is changes in female employment. We see in Italy, a girl who's starting a company often has to sign declaring that they will resign if they become pregnant. So they'll lose their job if they become pregnant. It's not very nice feature of our capitalist society, but that's what happens. So having more girls wanting a career means they are delaying their baby, having babies until later in life. And then there's the marriage. We're marrying much later in life. We do want to live a little before we marry. That will have an effect on the differences in birth rates. In some countries, they marry much earlier. In Africa, girls can get married in some countries at 12 years old. So this will have an effect. Death rates, quite explanatory. You've got living standards, whether you can eat good food and take good care of yourselves and heal yourself. The medical advances, the medicines, the hospitals, this will have a big effect on the death rate differences. Then natural disasters, especially wars. Wars change the death rates dramatically. In some parts of the world, we've seen dramatic changes just for that reason. And then you've got the net migration. This can be a problem for death rates, because if in Africa lots of young people are leaving Africa, they could be leaving. All the top qualified people could be leaving, and so there's not many doctors. Maybe there's not the many people to keep a family, etc. Maybe the hard workers leave, and the people are left unable to support themselves. So this can be a big problem for, and a reason for the differences in the death rates. Demography is the study of characteristics and changes in the population. There's these 4 characteristics that can be specific to a population. You've got age distribution. At the moment in Italy, we've got a lot of old people and not so many young people. So this age distribution is very out of balance, shall we say. And that can be a problem. That can be an economic problem. Sex distribution. So, maybe in some countries they have a lot more men and a lot less women, or geographic distribution. Again, in the north of Italy, there's a bigger population than the south. And then the occupational distribution, very important. Where are the jobs? And this is a big difference in Italy too. You've got a lot of the work and the opportunities in the north, not so many in the south. Okay. So Italy has an ageing population. So what does that mean? How does that affect the economy? In Italy, the pensions, the cost of pensions and hospitals, the government spending on pensions and hospitals are enormous. And to do that, they need a high tax take from the working population. And many of the people, in Italy, we see one of the highest tax burdens in the world. And this is one of the reasons, this ageing population. We do find, even in some areas of Italy, in some villages in the countryside, people are disappearing, the young people are leaving to find opportunities, and leaving an average age of 65 in a village where nobody's working, etc. So this has a big effect on the economy. Gender imbalance can be caused by a few things, like wars. Wars, we see a lot of men dying, and so this can really change the balance of the sex distribution in a country. Also, you've got violence like honour killings against females. Sex selection, this was common in China. In times like the 80s, China, the government said you can only have one child, and people wanted a male child. And this is terrible because it's not valuing the female characteristics, and they were selecting and having abortions if they had a female child due. So this could change, this did change Chinese sex distribution a lot. We see now there's a lot more males than females, which means they lose a lot. You know, a lot of diversity of female qualities and characteristics are especially important in the modern economy. So that can be not just a human rights abuse, but also a very stupid thing to do economically. And then you've got sex-specific migration to a country. We see lots of immigrants coming from Africa, very much on the masculine side. So the proportion of males coming from Africa is very high in comparison to females. And so that could have an effect. Okay.